Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind. Let's get into some liberal nonsense. You know, the naivete is really what drives me the most crazy, I'd argue. The sort of glossing over obvious, very important facts and circumstances, claiming that, oh, these are not actually problems, and pointing the finger at something that's politically convenient for their narrative, like, I don't know, white supremacy or systemic racism, pointing the finger there, saying, oh, well, you know, racist highways, that's the real problem. You know, I end up sitting back and scratching my head, questioning, why can't we have a real conversation? Why is it so difficult to come to a basic agreement on obvious facts, isolate the clear problem, and attempting to find solutions, being real, not tiptoeing around sensitive topics not to appear racist, but rather looking at what is obviously bad, pointing the finger and saying, yeah, that is not okay, and that should not be accepted in our society. I'll be honest with you guys, I wasn't sure if I was going to make this video, namely because I'm a white man, but how utterly ridiculous is that? Why? Because I'm white, I'm not allowed to have an opinion, I'm not allowed to discuss anything related to minority groups? It makes absolutely no sense. What we are looking at here is destructive. What I'm about to show you is shocking, and it's obviously part of the problem. It's not a white or black thing, it's just objectively wrong. It's sad, it's bad, and we should be able to admit that on both sides, and I don't know, maybe start coming up with a strategy as to how we're gonna fix this. We're talking about criminal culture today, and particularly its effect on the youth. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so we gotta talk about this clip. Black Conservative Perspective posted this on his Twitter account the other day. An individual by the name of It's Fat Swag tweets, I don't care how old Jit is, he slidin'. With this video, Greg Foreman or Black Conservative Perspective responded with a facepalm. Rightfully so. Take a look. You know, I don't know about you guys, but my reaction isn't, I don't care how old Jit is, he's sliding. My reaction is, well, how I responded in the comments section. This is incredibly sad. It's sad, it's frightening, it's wrong, it's horrifying, and it obviously isn't good. It's not leading to a positive outcome for people growing up around this nonsense. I got the Glock up on my side, something, and then it seems like shooting somebody in the legs. I throw a bullet and it hit you in your face. What is this kid, 8 years old? And then of course, yeah, you know, all the copium leftists come out going, well, it's art. Oh, it's just art. It's an expression of reality. You know, that used to be true maybe back in the 80s and 90s. There were great songs, you could call them, you know, ghetto poetry. For the most part, they all had a positive spin. This is drill rap. This is just like violent gang messaging. And obviously, young kids are being influenced by this music. In this case, and in many cases that we've seen, young kids are being influenced and groomed to participate in the culture, whether it be music or in real life. And you know, this is something that I think was exacerbated during the pandemic. This was one of my major points of activism at the time, specifically the effects of school closures within inner city minority communities. You know, in many cases, you have young kids growing up in poverty and broken homes. Going to school, that's the only real outlet. That's the only place where you could actually make a change, where you could have a positive impact on these kids during their developmental years. And what happened? For 2 years, Democrat politicians put these kids out on the street. They didn't have a solid home to go back to. And so we saw a huge spike in places like Washington, D.C. and others of roaming gangs of kids, not in school, totally forgotten, you know, playing life as if it's a video game, as if it's Grand Theft Auto. We covered the whole thing with the Kia boys. I'm not sure if it was Minnesota. I think it was in Minnesota, or it might have been in Milwaukee anyways. We covered how in one city alone, in 1 year alone, there were over 10,000 stolen cars. 10,000! And if that wasn't bad enough, most of the perpetrators were underage kids, minors. And remember how we covered in Washington, D.C. how carjackings had risen to a new historic high. And again, most of the kids involved in this criminal activity were kids. In some cases, 12, 13, 14 years old. Remember the Uber driver? They carjacked him. Remember when those 2 young girls, I think not older than 14 to 16 range, carjacked an Uber driver, drove the car while he was still halfway in it and ended up crashing and taking the man's life. Those were kids who committed that act. And now we have this story, which is an absolute travesty.
It was here on D Street Northwest, outside an office building, that 13-year-old Bernard Tony Jr. was shot and killed when he allegedly tried to carjack an off-duty federal security officer. It was around 10 Saturday night. Police say the officer was sitting in his car waiting for a shift to start when two juveniles told him to get out. According to the report, one of the teens had his hand in his front waistband pocket as if he had a handgun. And as he was complying, the officer pulled a gun and shot Tony in the chest. A second juvenile ran away. The off-duty officer's gun was the only one recovered from the scene.
Guns, carjackings, 13-year-olds, recipe for tragedy.
Two sources familiar with the investigation confirmed that Tony was arrested last May for a carjacking and robbery spree. This map shows the area where he allegedly committed 9 crimes in a 6-week period. News 4 reported he was 12 years old at the time.
A 13-year-old boy who lost his life during a carjacking where him and his young friend were committing a supposed armed robbery on a security guard, and he ended up defending his life. That same kid, by the way, involved in, I think, a spree of 8 armed robbery and armed carjackings as recent as this year. You know, obviously the art that lefty types continuously defend is having a real world impact. And it's no surprise why, because young kids are susceptible to the messaging. They're in their early developmental years, and essentially you're promoting the most heinous criminal acts and sort of criminal culture to those young children. You'd think if there's viewer discretion is advised, slapped as a label, which honestly doesn't even really exist anymore these days. Considering everything is digital, you think slapping a label is going to stop that music from being promoted to young kids? Now, obviously that isn't going to happen. These young kids are soaking this stuff up, and it's having real world devastating consequences. And where does it come from? Drum roll please, none other than Hollywood. The bastion of woke progressive thinking, the bastion of virtue signaling towards minority groups, is also making billions of dollars promoting dangerous criminal glorification content to the masses, to the youth, and we're wondering why we're seeing so much gang violence and so many young boys losing their lives in places like Chicago, Philadelphia, the list goes on. But of course, no. What are liberals gonna do? They're gonna blame systemic racism, racist highways, white supremacy, conservatives somehow, who have really no hand, no impact on policy in Democrat-run cities. They're gonna blame the police. You know, the front line, the only people actually trying to do something about it. Everything but actually tackling the crux of the problem. Anything but being real, accepting reality, and acknowledging the basic truth. Anything but, yet they tell you that they're the ones who care. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Yet they justify, excuse, and promote the exact thing that is leading to these gang wars and this gang violence that is taking so many black lives. Give me a frickin' break. That little music video there, it's shocking. It's honestly saddening. It hurts the soul. And we should be collectively, as a culture, as a community, as a people, doing everything in our power to disrupt this glorification of criminal action, but instead we justify it and go in this endless circle of illogical frickin' partisan nonsense. Anyways, that's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.